Baruch Hashem, we've succeeded in helping quite a few people overcome these desires, including the hardest ones that are, like I said, homosexuality, promiscuity, both for men and women, and so on and so forth. But this has to be taught in a certain way, as the sages taught us, which is you have to scare people to death. There's a reason why the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Karo, who did not write the Shulchan Aruch as a Musar book to scare people. He simply told you this is the law. This is the law. You follow, you go to heaven. You don't follow, you go to Gehenna. Simply. It's not like there's no sugarcoating when it comes to the Shulchan Aruch. And Rabbi Yosef Karo wrote in the Shulchan Aruch, wasting seed is the worst crime in the Torah. Now, of course, all of us know that the same is said about violating Shabbat. The same is said about bitul Torah. The same is said about chilul Hashem and other karet sins. Meaning that they can't all be the worst in the Torah, can they? Well, yes, they can. It's just that in essence, when a person violates this specific issue on a regular basis without doing tshuva for it, in essence, what Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Rambam, the Zohar, the Gemara, and all of the sages that have made this type of statement are saying is that even if you keep everything else, but you didn't do tshuva for this crime, it all goes to waste. You're going to get all of your reward in this world, but the next world is not going to look pretty. For how long? Forever. That's how bad it is. Rabbi Yosef Karo said that wasting seed is the worst crime in the Torah. The Rambam agreed. The Zohar agreed. In fact, many of the Chachamim said things that are much more extensive than that. Hence the reason of why the sages took extraordinary measures to teach us some of the details of the punishment, why they took extensive measures to teach us of how careful some of them were. As we read in the Gemara, there are countless stories about reward and punishment and so on. And actually in this week's parasha, Parashat Vayera, says, Vayedaber Elohim el Moshe vayomer elav ani Adonai. God spoke to Moshe and said to him, I am Hashem. Now, of course, a person that's reading the Torah for the first time in his life, or perhaps the first time he's reading it with commentary, he's like, why is Hashem telling Moshe that he's God? Like, I would assume that when God's talking to you, you're pretty much sure who's talking to you. You don't think it's your friend Steve. You don't think it's your wife talking to you, perhaps with a different voice that's perhaps coming from heaven. You know, obviously you realize it's God. What is the point here? Why is he reminding Moshe Rabbeinu that he's God? Rashi HaKadosh, Rashi, that you cannot survive a single verse in the Torah without him, specifies what is God's message here? To tell Moshe, in essence, tell us, why is he telling us he's God? The Gemara in Masechet Megillah says, 55 prophets are mentioned in the Tanakh. From Bereshit all the way to the end of the prophets, there are 55 prophets named by names. 48 males, 7 females. Gemara asks, how many prophets were there in history? Over 1.2 million. So how come only 55 prophets are mentioned out of 1.2 million? Simple. The ones that are mentioned, their message, whatever verse it is, whether it's the first verse in the Torah, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, Hashem created the heaven and the earth, or it's the verses that talk about the descendants of Cain, or it's the verses that talk about what happened with Ishmael and Esav, or it's the verses that talk about the different korbanot, or it's the verses that talk about what Am Yisrael did after they heard some bad news about what Israel looks like with all the giants that were there, and so on and so forth. Any verse you pick in the Torah, any verse that you pick in the Tanakh, whether it's a psalm, a long one, a short one, a psalm that was written by David HaMelech, a psalm that was written by Asaph, a psalm that was written by Moshe Rabbeinu, Adam HaRishon, or it's Proverbs, or it's Ecclesiastes, or it's the prophet Isaiah, or it's Ezekiel, any verse you have in the Torah, anything that's mentioned from the beginning of the Tanakh all the way to the end, the Gemara says, that's mentioned by the 55 prophets. that are name by name, that means that prophecy is relevant to every single person in every single generation until Mashiach arrives, for eternity, forever, beyond Mashiach. Why? That's what Hashem put in the Torah. All the other prophets, they were important. Some of them were extremely righteous even. How come they're not mentioned? Because their prophecy was only relevant for a specific amount of time. Whatever is mentioned in the Torah is relevant forever. So what prophecy is Moshe Rabbeinu telling us here? We have in the 5 books of Moses, we're in Sefer Shmot. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm God. What's the prophecy here? Rashi says, the prophecy here is, remember, dear Jew, remember, dear human being, I am God, and therefore, never underestimate my patience. I will wait, and I will wait, and I will wait, and eventually I will punish. That's what Rashi says. That's what Rashi says. Moshe, you're concerned about why is Paro look like he's winning? He's torturing our people. Why are all these wicked people allowed to torture our people? Don't worry, Moshe. I'm God. I have patience. I give people an opportunity to do tshuva. When I see that they're not in line to do tshuva, I let them continue sinning to build up the account so I can punish them even worse, Hashem Yishmo. That's what I am Hashem means. Look it up yourself. Look at what Rashi says. Look at what the sages say. Now this, you're going to say, wait, well, this sounds like God a gangster? Chas v'shalom. God has a system in place. Reward and punishment. You follow his system, you follow his Torah, you will get rewarded beyond any of your imagination. The smallest mitzvah, the smallest good deed will give you reward that's more than all of the good that all of the people that ever existed, ever had in their entire lives combined. On the other hand, the punishment is so severe that a person that's not scared of God is simply like a drunk person. Why? Because the punishment is just as severe. It's just as severe.